Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Huskies Huddle. In this video, we recap Week 5 of the 2022 CFL season. But really quickly, before we get started, if you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And with that said, let's get started with today's video. So a light slate of games this week, which is probably good because for a couple of these games, I think I'm going to go a little bit long here. So we'll start talking about them with the first game, talking about the Thursday night game last week between the Edmonton Elks hosting the Calgary Stampeders, where the Calgary Stampeders went in there and won the game 49-6. The thing about this game is that the final score really does look bad, but at one point of this game, it was 14-3. They're attempting a field goal in the middle of the third quarter, and Edmonton has a chance to make it an 8-point game. But there is a missed field goal return for a touchdown that ultimately, puts so much momentum in Calgary's control, and they really didn't turn back with it, and Edmonton really just folded underneath that pressure. So we'll start talking about this game from the Edmonton perspective. We'll talk about the losers first on this channel to end on a high note for all of these games. So I wanted to first talk about their mess at quarterback, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Edmonton's quarterback situation going forward, because Trey Ford, looking very promising, makes an outstanding play, one of the best plays in the CFL you'll see this season. And then the next play on a designed quarterback run takes a bad hit in the back of the shoulder, and now will be out multiple weeks with what they're calling a collarbone injury, I believe. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do at quarterback going forward. They made a trade today. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, trading Nick Arbuckle to the Ottawa Redblacks. So that provides a little bit of clarity there. They're going to start Taylor Cornelius this week against the Alouettes. They've already said that. But beyond that, what is the long-term plan? Do we see Kyle Loxley, a very interesting player so far this season, eventually start games for them at quarterback? He's been starting for them at wide receiver, but he did play quarterback while at the University of Texas, El Paso. So it should be really interesting to see what happens with this quarterback room going forward. I think when Trey Ford does get healthy, he is going to get a chance to reclaim that job, but it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds in Edmonton the next little while here at the quarterback position. And also for Edmonton, I think one thing that they're really struggling with this season is just to find any sort of identity. What does this team, when you look at it, do well? And I really just don't think there have been a lot of positives this year for the Elks when you talk about guys that are overachieving this year. So it should be really interesting to see if, trends start to develop on this roster, breakout guys, because I really don't see any guys really emerging so far this season, diamonds in the rough that Chris Jones has been known to find. It'll be very interesting to see. I think Thomas, I forget his first name, starting at defensive end, made a couple of really nice plays this week. But beyond that, I haven't really seen any of these newcomers make a big difference, and I think the veterans that they brought in have just been kind of okay so far this season. And, they're just lacking that identity and the strengths that they need to be able to rely on to win football games. So, that's what I think is missing from the Edmonton Elks so far this season. And, dropping another home game. They haven't won a home game in a year and a half now, and it's just very disappointing for the Elks. And then on the Calgary side of things, you just have to say they've done it again with this wide receiver position. Every year they seem to come in and they just snatch one of these rookies or younger players that nobody's really heard of, and they break out and become a star receiver. And that is Malik Henry this year, who after 5 weeks of play here in the CFL actually leads the league in receiving yards after a couple of massive games against Edmonton. And he's just been an explosive player for this offense. I think he's added a new element of elite speed. I think guys like Reggie Bagleton, Kamar Jordan, both excellent, well-rounded receivers, but they're not exactly the best vertical threat down the field. And I think that's really added another element to this Calgary offense, that three-headed monster. And that's the thing. They haven't really gotten Reggie Bagleton going so far this season. He has about, I think, 170 yards through 4 games. He's getting his targets, but just not a huge share of the targets. I think Kamar Jordan still remains their most targeted receiver this season, and he's still doing his thing as well. But when those 3 guys start to click all together and find their roles within this offense, I think this is going to be a three-headed monster here for Calgary in the receiving core. And Bo Levi Mitchell is looking better and better as the weeks go on here in the 2022 CFL season. And people could look at this Calgary team and say, they came from behind in a lot of these games. They may have not looked the most impressive of all the teams so far, despite being undefeated. But this was just a dominant performance and showed you they can get off to good starts to begin football games. I think the bye week really helped with that and then getting out of the gates faster for Calgary. So I think they are a team that I really trust going forward into a great clash here with Winnipeg. Don't know who I'm picking yet for that game. It's going to be very exciting to see, but I think the Stampeders are right back in the conversation as the best team in the CFL. And then the Friday night football game between the Ottawa Redblacks visiting the Saskatchewan Roughriders, where Saskatchewan won the game 28-13. And there was a football game that went on, and Saskatchewan is a classic West versus East game this year. The West came out on top, and Saskatchewan really had control of this thing basically start to finish. But what everybody's talking about, obviously, is the Garrett Marino hit, defensive tackle for the Saskatchewan Roughriders on Ottawa Redblacks quarterback Jeremiah Masoli, right to the knee. And the antics afterwards as well about celebrating the injury as he was being ejected from the game. So, that is what a lot of people are talking about, and I think it was a dirty hit. And when I look at it is usually from a league's perspective. The league has to do a better job of protecting these quarterbacks, and that's the thing. People will complain about how a quarterback is too protected in today's league, but ultimately they are so important for this league. And we have seen so many quarterback injuries over the last couple of years in the CFL. Look back to the 2019 season. You know who led the league in touchdown passes that season? McLeod Bethel-Thompson on a 4-14 Argos team. He led the league in touchdown passes because not all of these starting quarterbacks around the league could finish the season or even played most of the season. So, quarterback injuries have been a major problem over the last few years in the CFL, and, they have to get hits like that, especially to a guy like Masoli that has been so important in giving hope to this Ottawa Redblacks franchise. No, they don't have a win yet, but they felt like they could win a lot of those games that they've been in so far this season. So, just to lose him, that is going to be so devastating, I think, for the Redblacks going forward. I really don't think there's anything they really can do to replace it, though they trade for Nick Arbuckle this week from the Edmonton Elks, or today from the Edmonton Elks. I don't know if that's going to be enough to really make up for the loss and what Jeremiah Masoli can give you from a leadership and experience standpoint. So it's just a really tough situation to see for Redblacks fans, putting yourself in their shoes right now. It's just, you're staring down the barrel of a third dreadful season in a row, 3-15 in 2019, 3-11 last year, and, who knows, they don't have a win so far this year, and, maybe they get one this week against Hamilton, fellow winless team, but it's going to be tough for them going forward. And as for the Garrett Marino hit and whether he should serve any punishment, I definitely think it's a suspendable play, especially given the antics afterwards. But I don't know if it's going to end up being a 10-game or so suspension, because you look at the history of CFL suspensions, even the worst hits, you only see a couple of games given out. So I do think it's going to be somewhere in the 2 to 4 game range. They still haven't announced punishment as of the recording of this video, but it's going to be a really interesting decision on the CFL's part, because I definitely think you just need to get hits like that out of the game. You need to protect the quarterbacks, and I feel so bad for a guy like Jeremiah Masoli, who now loses basically the whole season. It looks like he's only going to be out 3 months, minimum of 3 months, but it's not an ACL tear, so that's good news from that perspective. But hate to see it to a guy like that. It's already went through a torn ACL in Hamilton, so when that happens, it's very disappointing to see, and I think Marino should serve his time and hopefully learn from this going forward. If not, I think he's not long for the CFL. Now, the ironic part about this game is that the Roughriders, who had struggled with penalties the first 4 weeks of the season, didn't really have a bad day in terms of taking penalties. They were relatively disciplined. They actually executed probably their best game of the entire season so far. They ran the ball very well. I think we got to give a little bit of credit to offensive coordinator Jason Moss, who's shown that he can adapt his scheme to fit the strengths of his players. Cody Fajardo, he was asked to do a lot of drop back passing stuff, make a few reads and make vertical passes down the field, which he just doesn't excel at as a CFL quarterback. He's much more of that effective guy when he's has a play action passing game those short to intermediate passing routes where he can take advantage of timing and chemistry with his receivers. So I think that is where Cody Fajardo really excels, and I think we're seeing the best of him so far this season. It's kind of reminding me of how Cody Fajardo played in 2019, where he played extremely well and was the West nomination for MOP. Now our final game of the week, which was Saturday night with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beating the BC Lions 43-22. And I think for BC, starting from their perspective first, it was that eventual letdown game after such a hot start to the season. You know, when you're a football team, you rarely see such, successful weeks in a row of, playing so well like the BC Lions were offensively and defensively, both at the same time, that it was eventually going to burn out at some point and they were going to regress to some level. And I definitely think we saw that in this game, even though I think there were still plenty of positives. Dominic Rhymes has looked excellent this season, free agent addition a couple of years ago, coming over from Ottawa in the receiving corps. I think that they're really showing that they have great secondary playmakers in this offense that can step into bigger roles, and I think that Nathan Rourke is showing the ability to, even though he got behind this game and it was just a little bit too much to overcome, I think that you're seeing his ability to bounce back from early game mistakes. And that's so crucial for a quarterback to not, let it get in their head. And I saw some incredible throws from that throw to Josh Pearson. I think it was a 65-yarder, incredible throw, one of the best you'll see in the CFL this season. I definitely am still a Nathan Rourke believer after seeing this game. We just need to see how he bounces back from a loss, and it'll be very interesting to see. I think this was an eventual letdown, and there's nothing too much to be concerned about if you're BC. That being said, if there is some concern, I believe it's about that offensive line that's starting to show some cracks. Obviously playing Winnipeg, and Ottawa had some pretty good pieces. They've added the last couple of years on that defensive line. So two pretty good defensive lines the last couple of weeks, but you're starting to see some regression, especially from those tackle positions that, I think a lot of those plays in that game against Winnipeg, Willie Jefferson, obviously, you're just not going to shut that guy down, but I'm really interested to see when they play the better defensive lines like the Winnipegs, like the Calgarys. It's going to be very interesting to see how they play going forward, but overall I think still that unit looks pretty good compared to where they were last season. And then finishing on the Winnipeg side of things, Zach Collaros truly was the MOP in this one. He brought it from pass one of the game, and he was just so incredible in terms of his ability to extend plays with his legs and improvise. I never really gave him credit for how good he was at doing that prior to the 2019 season, and he is just making incredible plays for this offense. Yeah, guys like Dalton Schoen that looks like the front runner for Rookie of the Year in the CFL at this point, had a couple of touchdowns in this one, over 100 yards. He's looking very good as a rookie for this offense, and I think slowly they're starting to gain a little bit more explosiveness. I don't know if they're ever going to reach the heights of last year offensively, because I don't know if there's a Kenny Lawler in this receiving core right now, but ultimately I think you're replacing it through other means, and this defense is still probably the best, or it is the best still in the CFL, especially with the way that they're built with all those veteran players that have been together for multiple seasons now. You just trust this team so much going forward, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next week when they play Calgary. And lastly, I just wanted to shout out kick returner Janarian Grant. Really got the ball rolling with an opening kickoff return touchdown, and honestly, he's looked really good this year. You knew he was going to break a long one at some point, and it's really good to see that after he had a little bit of a down season last year for Winnipeg. But with that said, that is going to be the end of this recap, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Be sure to let me know in the comment section what you guys took away from this week in the CFL. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.